Okay, so this is the moment we've been all waiting for. Time to do the final reveal. There we go. I'm guessing a lot of DJs may have already dug in the identity of a storyteller, so probably not as much of a surprise to a lot of you all. But that's Bryce Weiner. Bryce Weiner, who is our first storyteller, and it is pure serendipity how it all happened. Just some context, I recently wrote a book, and the title of the book is How I Met God and Got Into Crypto. And the first chapter in the book itself is about how the legend of Satoshi was such a huge impact on me and played such a huge role in me getting into crypto, right? And little did I know that, 3-4 years later, the first story that we would end up launching on StoriesDotFun, even the fact that we would end up creating something like StoriesDotFun. And the first storyteller, how it all happened essentially was we actually had a huge influencer, a huge name, who has like insane following on crypto, and also has like a crazy story to tell. And please, that's your phone. And we had pretty much onboarded them, and I think it was pretty much the last leg of discussion that we had with them. And just at the last minute, it went on the back burner, right? And I was pretty disappointed because I felt that was as big a launch as we could really get. And I was just midnight scrolling through my X, and I came across this interesting thread of a father who had this beautiful journey of rescuing his daughter over a period of 3-4 years, and phenomenal journey. Not just the rescue, the act of the rescue itself, but how it was really done, right? And we'll have Bryce share a lot more about that in course of this live. But when Bryce actually shared with me, like it was like a 70-pager PDF, which we've cut down for you guys, like up to 54 pages. When I read, and I kind of read chapter 6, is when I dropped my phone in disbelief. Right, when I read chapter 6 of what Bryce sent and what you guys will also end up reading on StoriesDotFun, I couldn't believe what had fallen into my lap. It was absolutely pure serendipity, right? I mean, I'm going to like get straight on to Bryce. I'm sure you guys have context. I'm sure your questions are coming in. I'm going to have a look at it as we talk to Bryce. Bryce, the stage is all yours. Thank you so much for doing this after all these years. And the first question we have for you is, where were you all these years and why now? I think that's the first question that everyone wants to know.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you to Stories.Fun team. It's been a lot of fun working with you guys over the last couple of weeks to get this ready, and I really appreciate all the hard work you put into it. This story has been around. I've been in crypto since there's been crypto. And I had a big, long career, decade at least, of launching layer 1 blockchains. So before the meme coins, before ICOs, we were launching actual blockchains that you could mine with Bitcoin mining equipment. And that's when I really, became, achieved a little bit of prominence in the community, and folks started to know who I was and what I was capable of. But I never mentioned anything about before I showed up until one day back in November of 2022, I was scrolling through Facebook and a memory popped up. And it was the memory of the day that I brought my daughter home. And we'll get to all that, but this is a good open because it kind of brings us to here. If you go to my profile on X, which is my name, Bryce Weiner, you'll see the pinned tweet. And in the pinned tweet is sort of the canon events. Not really the details. I don't really link things together too much. I just kind of sprinkled out there that it was pretty major, what I had accomplished. And I'd gone through my entire crypto career and never mentioned it. People that I'd worked with, people that I'd known, people that have followed me for years and years and years had no idea All right, so you didn't hear anything. I was talking to myself. My daughter was kidnapped in August of 2010 after being groomed for 4 or 5 months. And we found out too late what was going on. We tried everything we could to keep it apart, but it didn't work. We failed. And that kind of kicked off 3 years of hell. And, I was a software engineer, and I was married, and this was just beyond anything that I'd ever had to deal with in my entire life. But, the universe doesn't give you problems that you can't solve. If my dad always used to say, if it's a problem and you can see it's a problem, that means you're the one who's there to fix it. And we hired private investigators and child recovery experts and tried to get the FBI involved, and nothing worked. Absolutely nothing worked. So it became clear, even after the first month that she was missing, that if she was going to come home, I had to do it myself. And that was sort of the beginning of the end of my old life. All the things I was doing, all the projects I was working on, I had to quit my job, and my wife actually became sort of an alcoholic. Not sort of, but my wife lost it. She became an alcoholic. In order to get out of bed in the morning, she had a bottle of Sky vodka sitting next to the bed, and she'd have to take shots just to get moving, just to deal with the day. And I couldn't deal with an alcoholic and a missing child at the same time, so we decided that we were going to split up. And that was in December of 2010. So I started to wind down all the stuff that I was involved in and left in January of 2011. And I decided that I was going to go back to where I had grown up, which was a town called Covington, Kentucky, which is just south of Cincinnati, because I knew the area and I knew the people and the kind of the dynamics involved. So it felt safe to do what I felt I needed to do, and that is become somebody else. And I wanted to learn about that world, that criminal element. How does sex trafficking work? What are the stresses involved? What do the people think? And most importantly, what did it do to the girls? So I moved back to Covington and decided that I was going to use my 401k that I cashed out and any of the money that I had available, and I was going to become a criminal. I was going to join them in their hell. And in April of 2011, I purchased an apartment building and I set up shop. Like New Jack City was one of my favorite movies growing up as a kid. And of course, in that movie, they bought it. They took over an apartment building and went to business, and that was my inspiration for that. So, I went to some local strip clubs that I used to work in when I was younger. I was a manager, and decided to recruit some girls and put them to work. And I learned. I called it public education. Because I had no military training. I wasn't a cop or anything like that. And the only thing I could do was kind of learn it on the fly. And in the meanwhile, try and build the things that I felt would be necessary in order to bring my daughter home. So while learning about criminal elements and how all that world works and operates, I also did things like created Facebook pages and set up websites. So if my daughter it's like basically SEO bombing. So if my daughter ever searched for her name on the internet, she would find that we were looking for her and that I loved her and that I wanted her to come home. And it worked. And after about a year, we were able to communicate very little. First, for just basically, she would call me at absolute random on Skype. And then she was able to send some emails. So as time progressed, the folks who had her relaxed. a little bit and allowed her to communicate, because not communicating was actually making it harder to control her, frankly. So they gave in a little bit, and that was all I needed. And she had sent some images of where she was and the things that she was doing, but wouldn't tell me where she was. And back in that time, there was no Google Earth. There was a program called TerraView. And I'm a math guy. I'm currently a theoretical physicist, so I like math. And I was able to determine from the photographs roughly where she was on the planet. And from the time of day and the month of the year and the shadows of, that were being cast by things like cacti and whatnot, I could tell roughly where she was. And I had it narrowed down to a 100-mile strip in Mexico. She was somewhere along this latitude. And that was almost all I needed. And it wasn't until a few months later that I was able to locate the exact town that she was in. And I'll even say it. It's this little, if you look on a map, you can type it in. It's called Cayotepec. It's a little dirt road shithole. I don't even know if Google Maps even has pictures of it. It's so small. There's maybe 100, 150 people there. And the entire town was involved in maintaining control over my daughter. So this kind of changed the dynamics of things greatly. Because, of course, my first plan was to go in guns blazing and, stage a dramatic rescue and whatnot. I even had some friends that were going to come and join me. But that wasn't going to work, because we couldn't take on a whole town. This is not the A-Team. This is not fantasy. This is real life. And nobody wanted to die. And, of course, we didn't want my daughter to be injured at all in the process either. In fact, she was being held in a cave underneath one of the houses in the town. And I went to Mexico a few times in order to track her down once I had some of the information involved. And when I saw the situation, I actually went to Cayotepec. I disguised myself as a blind beggar, complete with cane, and dressed like a local. And, I just looked like some random vagabond just passing through, which did actually happen from time to time. So it wasn't weird. And I was able to walk around the town and kind of get a feel for it pretty much unmolested. I couldn't stay long, but I was able to see that my plan about going in guns blazing was not going to work. I mean, we could have had a platoon of Marines, and it could have failed. Speaking of a platoon of Marines. So all of her communications were being monitored. So I came back to the States, and I came up with a plan. I didn't have much money left, but I remembered that way back in the early days of Bitcoin, I had hit 3 blocks, and I had those coins available. And this is June, July, August, the summer of 2013. And Bitcoin was on the way up. It was getting up to 500. And I was amazed, because I'd completely forgotten about it, because I just had other shit to do. Crypto was not a thing that I thought of, even, but I had better things to do. But suddenly it became relevant again. And while all my peers were cashing out whatever Bitcoin they had in order to fund their startups, I used it to fund my daughter's recovery. And money's like a psychedelic drug. Too much or too little, and it will warp your perspective on reality. That was what I counted on in order to bring her home. So I started to pump money into the town via RIA. I would sell the BTC on Craigslist and then send a few $1,000s via RIA into Mexico. Because you got to, Coinbase didn't even exist at this point. So you have to kind of get a scope on how early this was in crypto. There was no infrastructure. And if you wanted to sell Bitcoin, the easiest way to do it was Craigslist. Not to mention you could do a 30% markup. So, because nobody wanted to deal with MT-Gox, and going through their KYC was a mess. And I don't know if you're familiar with MT-Gox, but it was one of the first crypto exchanges, if not the first Bitcoin exchange. A Bitstamp was around, but again, it was on foreign soil. Nobody knew what was trustworthy and what wasn't. So, Craigslist was really the easiest way to go. And that worked. I pumped $15,000, $20,000 in 30 days into that town. And folks were literally drunk on money. They were partying every weekend. People went out and bought new trucks. And I could see, when I would talk to my daughter on Skype, I would see how things had changed in the background. How the entire town was starting to use that money, and and I could tell that it was almost time. And that's when I decided to pitch to my daughter that if we were going to get her back, that she needed the help. I couldn't just storm in and rescue. She had to make the decision that it was time to come home. And that took some time. Because, when these things happen, part of the brainwashing is your family doesn't love you, they're not looking for you, they'll never accept you after all that's happened, and all this kind of shit. So I had to overcome all of that. And then once I did, then it was go time. And in November of 2013, and this is it's not like the movies. There are long periods of time when you do absolutely nothing. And you're just waiting for the phone to ring, or waiting for something to happen, or waiting for some indication or some information to come in. So I started a Twitter account. And that's when I started the Twitter account that I have now. And I would just tweet. And I would tweet about Bitcoin. Because suddenly Bitcoin was kind of important to me. Bitcoin, I was never there for Bitcoin in the early days, as much as I might have liked to have been. But when I needed it, Bitcoin was there for me. And my entire career in crypto was repayment of that debt. My debt to crypto, my debt to Bitcoin. And, but people didn't, they didn't know who I was, because I didn't participate on forums at all, and I didn't go to conferences or anything like that. But I knew everything there was to know. And so in 2013, in November 19th, that's the pinned tweet, we decided we were going to, it was November 15th. We decided we were going to execute the plan. And she was going to run out in the middle of the night and go to a bus stop. And the goal was for her to make it to the bus stop, get a bus, go to Mexico City, and then go to the American consulate. And once she was on American soil, we were going to be able to get her back. Well, that kind of worked. She did make it to the consulate, but it took so long for the bus to get there that the town woke up and they realized she was missing. And if my daughter was missing, that means the gravy train was going to end. So they piled a bunch of guys in the back of the trucks with rifles and Chivos, AK-47s, and went to the embassy to go get my kid back. So I'm sitting around, and there was this long period of time when I didn't hear anything because she was on the bus, and I was just waiting for the phone to ring. And finally it did. But it wasn't my daughter. It was the vice consul in Mexico, who said, your daughter is here, and she told us everything that happened, but we have a little bit of a problem. And I was like, okay. She says, there's now a large group of armed men outside the consulate threatening to come in, and we had to deploy a platoon of Marines. So, as I was saying, let me just post a link to my profile real quick.
And as cinematic as it may appear, the breaks are totally unintended. It just so happens, as Bryce pointed out, that X tends to kind of end the stream somewhere around 17 minutes by itself. But like I said, we are going to have more and more live sessions throughout the night. I think this particular session we will probably end in a few minutes. And then, of course, Bryce will come back to talk about what a lot of you people are particularly asking about his early contribution to Bitcoin and blockchain. And I think as a degen, that's a story that hits right at the heart of what we all stand for, right? And another beautiful aspect that I really want to bring up, hopefully in the next session, is that Bryce has, of course, spoken about one of the most endearing aspects of his life has been his role as a father. But what I would request Bryce to also talk about is his equation with his father. I think that's a beautiful relation there. So while we get to hear about Bryce as a father, I personally am very interested in learning to know more about Bryce as a son. So we'll cover that in the next session. But yeah, so Bryce, do you want to take
pick up
from it? Yeah.
So what we now, just to kind of recap, my daughter's in the consulate, and there's a bunch of armed guys out front. The consulate had deployed a platoon of Marines to dissuade them from trying to do anything stupid. And my plan was that I told the consulate to tell them that they missed her and she was gone, and that they'd taken her to the airport to get a plane home. And once they piled back into their trucks to leave, sneak her out the back door and put her on a bus. Then I got in my car and I drove into Mexico to follow that bus. And I rode by, and I met it about halfway, a little bit more than halfway to Tijuana, and followed the bus the whole way, just about a mile or so behind, to make sure nothing stupid happened on the way, that she would actually, make it there. And she did. It was another day and a half of following that bus. And once she got to the bus terminal, she called me and said, where do I go now? I said, just to make sure everything was, I found a strip mall. And I was sitting in a strip mall in the parking lot. And I said, okay, go find a random taxi. And then once you're in the taxi, don't take the first taxi that comes along, take the second one. Like, wave the guy off and then flag down another taxi and take that one.
Okay, so I'm going to...
Sure.
Do you want to talk about go back a little bit to your stint at the Freemason and how probably all of that helped you in strategy?
Yeah.
Later?
Well, once we get the big broad strokes, we can dive in.
Sure.
So, when she got into the cab, and then after she was in the cab, because we were still on the phone, I gave her the address to the strip mall where I was sitting in the parking lot, and she gave that to the taxi driver just for a little bit of added protection, because I didn't know how deep their ties with the various cartels went, which is why there was a little bit of cloak and dagger at the end. But luckily, nothing went awry. She showed up 5 minutes later, and the picture that I posted on Facebook, that's currently in the pinned tweet of my profile, was taken within 5 minutes after us being reunited after she was been missing for about 3 years. And of course, there was trying to get her back across the border was a bit of a challenge, because I didn't have her ID or paperwork, and I had my passport. But if you can tell from that picture, she actually looked like she was a Mexican. So I was essentially trying to cross the border with an undocumented minor. And I was, of course, doing it legally. So when I got to the border, they said, "Sir, would you mind pulling off back here, please? We'd like to talk to you." And they separated myself and my daughter, and I got put into a jail cell. A bunch of guys with MP5s and shit, the Mexican border and the Border Patrol and the U.S. Border Patrol both had questions they needed answered. But they didn't want to talk to me. They wanted to talk to her. And I don't know how she got it to this day. But the only reason why I wasn't sitting in jail is because she had a torn, tattered photocopy of her birth certificate in the bottom of her bag that somehow she'd obtained in the last few years. And it had my name on it as her father. And that was all the proof that they required after they looked her up and then looked me up. And they saw that we were already in the system, but we can get to that later. I guess I got to talk about it now. One of the detectives, was the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Department. One of they are a bunch of chuckleheads, probably one of the worst sheriff's departments in the country. And this brainchild of a detective, for some reason, thought that I had abandoned the search for my daughter, and as such, reported her to the state. So in California, when something like that happens, she was made a ward of the state. And as soon as that happens, they put out a warrant for her arrest. So my daughter was as soon as we were reunited, I couldn't even see her. She was instantaneously shipped off to foster care. And I remember sitting there in a jail cell like, this is stupid. This is the dumbest shit ever. And because after all I'd been through, here was the anticlimactic result, right? And a guy from the California Highway Patrol came in, and he says, and I kind of looked at him like, now what? And he says, no, don't, that's not why I'm here. He's like, I just wanted to come in and shake your hand because I'm a father, and I don't know if I could have done what you did. And I looked him dead in the eye, and I shook his hand, and I said, I hope you never have to find out. And he kind of got a little tear in his eye, and I got a little tear in my eye. And he says, just sit tight. We're processing you out. You're going to be released. We know that everything's on the level. In fact, the detective, we've been in contact with the detective on your case from the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's. He vouched for you. He vouched for the whole story. And we're going to be releasing you shortly. And then as soon as I was released, I got a call from the detective who did nothing but apologize profusely and swore to me that I wouldn't have to do anything, I wouldn't have to get a lawyer, that he was going to talk to a judge, we were going to get this processed out, and my daughter and I would be reunited as soon as humanly possible. Which he was good on his word. If nothing else, he was good on his word. And I actually have paperwork that from the Santa Barbara family courts, which is kind of the punctuation to all of this, where the judge apologized to me on the record. Because this was, what happened to my daughter was a systemic failure over and over and over again, not on a national level, not on a state level, but on the local authorities, time and time and time again. And it was that failure that they had to make up for. Or, frankly, I was going to sue the shit out of them. But all's well that ends well. And my daughter and I were reunited in 90 days. And we moved to another part of the county and started our life over again. And, Adi had mentioned my dad. And my dad is my hero. Like, people call me smart, but my dad was a legit fucking genius. And he always, because he had the years on me, no matter how smart I got, he was always one step ahead. And he helped me in ways that, to this day, I'm only just discovering. Like, for instance, back when I was a criminal, frankly, most of the girls that I dealt with had severe drug problems. They were on heroin. This was before fentanyl. This was still when heroin and oxys were still around. And the opioid epidemic was really just getting into full swing. And one night my dad was like, Bryce, you need to come to the house. I've heard some things. We need to talk. Because word had gotten back to my dad that I was not exactly behaving myself. And he kind of wanted to do a head check and see what was going on. And my dad sat me down at the kitchen table, and I told him everything. I held nothing back. And without saying a word when I was done, my dad just got up from the kitchen table and walked into his office, his den, and he was a type 2 diabetic. And he came back with a bag full of syringes. And he slid them across the table. He says, do you have access to clean needles? I says, no. He says, now you do. So that gave me an idea. I started running a needle exchange. I started to take better care of the people who were in my care. Because I did care for them. I cared for all of them. I got to know all of these women who were just terribly damaged as people. We set up a daycare. So while they were working, their kids would be taken care of in a safe environment. I set up a needle exchange, like I said. We would take, and then there were the rich kids who would get caught up in heroin, and their parents would send them to rehab and get them scripts for Suboxone, and they would come back and they wouldn't give a shit because they were rich. Like, they would just go back to rehab again. Who cares? They could afford it. So what I started to do was, when those people were looking for heroin, I would trade them heroin for Suboxone. And I ended up running a underground rehab for a little while. And not everybody made it. Some of the girls passed on, but not all of them. In fact, most of them didn't. And I would say I had about a 75% success rate. And I keep in touch with everybody who's still around. We're friends on Facebook because these girls are my family. They're a part of who I am today. And I would not be here talking to you about this today if not for them and their sacrifices too. So this story really isn't just about me. And as I would very much encourage folks to go to StoriesDotFun, get my story, and read the details, because there's pictures. These are real people. This really happened. And I wish my dad were around to see it today. He passed away in 2014, but he did live long enough to see me succeed. And that was the first time in my whole life that my dad ever told me that he was proud of me, because I had finally done something that he could never have done himself. So, you want to take a break, or you want to keep going, or?
I mean, it's not that I want to take a break, but I think the situation demands that we take a break, because X tends to cut this off every 17 minutes, and we also need to charge our devices.
So we'll charge the devices, we'll take a break, we'll come back, and we'll answer your questions.
Yeah, we will. And I mean, I have a lot to say, but then I'll probably start off when we do the next live stream. So guys,
do you want to preview what we're going to talk about next?
Absolutely, absolutely. So first things first, Bryce's story, as he mentioned, is actually live on StoriesDotFun. You can unlock it for $9. Phenomenal story. Every time, I mean, by virtue of having done this time and again, I probably read his story, lived his story more than probably just after Bryce. If there's anyone who's read his story more and knows more details at this point, it's probably got to be me and some of the people who are documenting him, I guess. It just gives me goosebumps every single time. And for me particularly, that happens every time he talks about his father. I think that's when, it's most of the times you're really seeing Bryce as the dad, the father, the technologist. But it's very endearing to see Bryce as a son. I think that's when the child in him really comes out, and that's the part that I find most endearing.
And I guess I want to mention this because there's some folks tweeting about it. I'm sitting here talking to you. That price action is legit. That's not us. We are sitting here talking with you guys. So, the Stories.Fun team is working on stuff in the background, of course, making sure everything goes smoothly. But, here's my phone. I've been sitting here talking to you. So, market action is market action. I've launched a lot of cryptocurrencies, so I know how it goes. Believe me, I know how it goes.
So, yeah, I think what we're really coming on to next is something that I think 20th July would probably be a massive truth bomb on the entire community, right? And I think what we're discussing, I mean, it's funny because for Bryce, of course, he's lived the kind of life he has, and of course for him, his daughter's rescue is predominantly the most, is kind of at the heart of his story, right? But of course, what we are going to really discuss next, as we all know, has insane repercussions, right? Cultural repercussions. And that's something that I'm personally very excited to share with you.
Yeah, we haven't even really got to the good part.
Yeah. The so-called, I mean, of course, your daughter's story is as endearing as it gets, but as far as the Degen community here is concerned, I think this is something that it's a date that you'll probably remember for a long time. And I'm not saying this because I'm shilling stories.fun. Honestly, I didn't care. I just realized during this live stream there are so many more things I could have done to shill some of my personal projects or stories, but I don't give a damn about those things at this point, right? And this is the degen in me talking about what is possibly the biggest mystery of the last 3 decades, right? Easily, in terms of the impact that it's had on the world and in terms of the impact it's going to have in the world in the future and in terms of the impact it's had on all of us, right? And we're going to go right at the heart of that legend, that mystery about what happened in the early days of Bitcoin, who are the people involved, how did it all come into fruition, and I can't wait to get started. I just got to charge my iPhone, and I'll see you guys in an hour from now. Okay?
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Bryce. Thank you. Thank you guys for joining in.
See you in an hour. More to come.
So just to set some context, this is not just a meme coin. The thing about real life narratives is that they have a really long shelf life, right? We all know for how long stories, some of the most fantastic stories that we know of, right, continue to impact us thousands of years later. And I mean, Bryce's story definitely one of those stories that that will continue to inspire generations in so many more ways than one. And
Making me blush.
and so of course the entire idea of stories is that we not just want you to make money out of the tokens that you own, but we want you to become a part of the story. And that, for me as a storyteller and someone who loves story, is a once in a lifetime opportunity, right? How many times do we really get to become a part of a story, own a part of a story that we so truly really love? And I think one of the missions at StoriesDotFun is to really enable that. And as part of that, every token that we really launch has some really strong utilities, really powerful utilities to go with it. And Bryce and us, we actually spent quite some time discussing potential utilities for the tokens. Some of them were absolute no-brainers, which we already have listed for you, which Bryce is going to talk more about right now. And over the period of next few days, we are going to have a lot more utilities as the community grows and evolves. So Bryce, do you want to tell holders what's in store for them on the DAD token?
Sure. So one of the things, like my current career, I moved out of crypto and into theoretical physics. And this year I've already published 3 peer-reviewed papers, mostly on cosmology and astrophysics. And I'd like to joke that, I left crypto for theoretical physics because the math is harder. Crypto wasn't really a challenge anymore. And with that, the first kind of level of entry for utility is when you join the story, I like to think about it as, securing a place in immortality. And kind of tying that into the theoretical physics, our first level of sort of VIP access is going to be, I will mention you by whatever name you want, even if it's Bodie McBoatface or whatever, in one of my peer-reviewed papers. You will be a part of the scientific legacy of the human race. So that's sort of like the initial entry point. And that's kind of where we are right now, at least as far as what I do on a daily basis. If you look through my feed, it's a bunch of math and physics stuff, because that's pretty much what captivates my attention these days. And just to kind of let you know what I'm into in that regard, before we go into the rest of the utilities, in November of last year, I was talking to a couple buddies of mine on X, and we're all like comic book fans. And we were talking about the MCU and the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the likelihood of an actual multiverse. And I thought, I wonder how many different multiverses there are. So I tried to calculate it out, and it didn't work. And frankly, it didn't work because another friend of mine was monitoring the conversation. His name is Chris Dupree. Hey, Chris. And he says, you can't do it that way. The way that I was figuring it out was wrong. You got to figure it out differently. And I was like, well, shit. So I actually did. And I went to go double check my numbers, but there was no actual numbers anywhere in science. Nobody had ever tried to quantify the multiverse before. So I started looking at how one might do that. And long story long, I actually made a discovery, a legitimate scientific discovery, in the cosmic microwave background, where I discovered the rate at which the universe manifests. So if you think about the universe like a giant computer, right, like a simulation or a hologram, I actually used what's known as the holographic principle to derive the frame rate of the universe. No shit. And this has been peer reviewed. It's actually been, it was published back in February. And then to verify it, I turned around and used that number to solve a couple problems that have existed in astrophysics for the last 5 or 6 years. And then that was my second paper. And that was also published this year. And if you go on my profile on X and you click the link there, that's my OCR ID. And that's got a link to all of my peer-reviewed and published papers. And if you go and click on one of them, you'll see that there's a special thanks and acknowledgments section at the end of each one of these papers. So the reason I'm going through this is because you can see I've already thanked a bunch of people, who, including Chris and my friends Brad and Larry, who were the ones who were kind of there when I made the discovery. You will be one of those people. And I'm not going to talk about amounts of tokens that you have to have or the entry price or anything like that, because that's all on StoriesDotFun, and you guys can go, look that up on your own. But we're going to talk about what it is and what it means. When you publish a paper like this, it gets indexed over and over and over again. And it literally gets integrated into the knowledge of the human race, which is kind of cool. It's like a route to immortality. And that's what I'm inviting you to participate in, is join me on that, and any money I make from this token, and I do own some, by the way. I bought some during the break. And all my friends have bought it. This is going to help pay for that research. I'm not attached to a university. I'm an independent researcher as it is. I am a member of the Institute, or the Information Physics Institute, IPI, out of London, UK. And in fact, one of my good friends is the founder of that, Dr. Melvin Vopson, who is a world-renowned physicist. He's one of the top 5 cited physicists in the world. His papers are cited by everybody. And he is, in fact, the father of simulation theory. So when you talk about the universe as the simulation, that's kind of like in the realm that we're operating in. And my specific research is literally quantifying how the simulation operates. What are the exact mathematics, what are the exact mechanisms by which the universe creates itself? So, that's the first level. Now, we've also, to talk about the next, perk, as it were, is the ability to, we've already signed a deal for a documentary. So you're going to be viewing this on Netflix or Amazon. We haven't made a deal with the distributor yet, so I don't know which platform it'll be on. But I have signed a deal with a professional documentary producer. They've produced several documentaries. And that deal is currently in place. So what we'll do is we will mention you in the credits with a special thanks. Also, the next sort of level up is we have just opened talks for a major motion picture. And this will be, it's not a documentary, but an actual major motion picture released in theaters. And we should have that deal locked down sometime in the next 2 or 3 months. But we will absolutely put you in the credits at a certain level. And if you exceed even that level, we will be able to put you in as an extra. You will actually be able to appear in the movie. So, we're going to come up with more utility as time goes on and integrate some of these things. But we wanted to present something with, the Stories.Fun team and I talked about this a lot.
You were talking about the revenue buyback? Revenue buyback,
Not yet.
potential meet and greet. with the stores.
Well, then that's what he's talking about is some of the other things that we had discussed. But that should just at least let you know there's more to come. Even the stuff that we're talking about today as far as what the utility is, we're going to be working on more things as this grows, as it expands. This is not going away. It's not a one-off because my story isn't finished. Literally, I talked to Dr. Vopson not a couple weeks ago when my last paper came out of peer review, and my last paper was on black holes and redefining how black holes work. Based on observational science, mind you. It's not purely theory. And he said that, in the next 10, 20 years, there might actually be a Nobel Prize in this. Because the work that I'm doing is so fundamental and so revolutionary. And I only mention that not to toot my own horn, but to say that the story isn't over. That what we've talked about today is only just the beginning of where this is going, and you get to participate and come along with me for the rest of the ride. A lot of folks have asked if I'd set up an X community. We'll do that in the next few days. And that way, you guys can be kept apprised of everything that I'm doing. I've done this for years and years and years in crypto, and I know how it works. And we'll be rolling that stuff out over the next few days and weeks, so you'll have plenty of things to talk about and plenty of reason to hold the token and even buy more.
Yeah, just to add on to what Bryce essentially said, I'll just take a step back and go back to the vision of the platform itself, right? A little bit background about me as the founder of Stories.Fun. My first book was crowdfunded on Kickstarter. At the time, it was the highest crowdfunded book in India, 6 stars from Asia.
Congratulations, I didn't know that.
Yeah, the book went on to become adapted into a global OTT, right? So I have been through, but that was all entirely Web 2. Web 3 wasn't as evolved as it is today. So I managed to do that somehow, crowdfund money from Kickstarter, and then somehow publish the book myself, market it myself, and then go separately pitch for an OTT adaptation, etc. So I've been through the entire cycle myself, and that's pretty much the vision here at Stories.Fun as well. Every story that we launch, so the initial bunch of stories are all going to be curated, and that's the thing about, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I could be wrong, but the sense that I get, and this is purely intuitive, is that I feel the meme market is dead, right? I think there is a desperate need.
Saturated.
If you look at the volumes that, of course now Bong.Fun being the market leader, if you look at the volumes that Bong's doing from the peak of what the meme cycle was, what Pump was doing at its peak, I think people are getting saturated of memes, and it's obvious, it's just psychological, right? There's only so much that short-term narrative like a meme can take you. And at Stories, we firmly believe that stories have been the OG memes, isn't it? Like from, stories have kind of been...
It's got to come from somewhere.
Yeah, and stories have always been the most potent tools for attention economy ever since we know, right? It's the basis of some of the, long-lasting religions. It's the basis of some of the biggest cults. It's the basis of, some of the biggest wars, right, etc. So stories have moved humanity for time immemorial, and I think that's going to continue for a lot more time. And the mission at Stories is that we want to empower creators to take their stories all the way. One of the most smallest things that we've done is we've actually collaborated with Morphic Studios, which helps us make like the anime. In fact, the video that you saw of Bryce was actually done using Morphic. It's an AI anime creation tool, right? This was totally unimaginable a couple of years ago. Who thought they could turn their life into an anime video trailer for a minute or so? So we want to empower creators with more and more tools that everyone can take their life and create meaningful IPs out of it, right? And Bryce is a classic example. In fact, we were just discussing some of the things Bryce hasn't mentioned yet. We will announce details more shortly. Definitely, buybacks are part of the plan in terms of the revenues that even from Stories, we would, the tokens that we launch, we would love to kind of buy back some of the supply. And this is just the beginning, guys. I think this is just the beginning. I think there is so much more in the pipeline, particularly with Bryce's story, that you will be privy to a lot of updates over the next couple of days for sure. And
Days, weeks, months,
months.
years. I mean, this is not.
Yeah.
I've been around in crypto forever, like literally since there's been crypto. I guess we can talk about that pretty soon. And I've launched hundreds of coins. And like these were like meme coins before they were meme coins, right? There were colored coins and country coins. And you can go on YouTube and search my name and you can see that I was giving speeches on this stuff in 2014. And you can actually listen to the speeches and you can see exactly how much of the stuff that I predicted actually came true. Better than 50%. More like 60, 75% of it. And this is, I agreed to do this with the StoriesDotFun team for just that reason. This is one of those things where it's a new kind of process on the same old game. It's not just a meme of the meme coins. This is a new iteration of this sort of structure. And I really think that there's going to be a lot of, Stories.fun copiers after this breaks wide, because this is the next big idea, in my opinion.
Hey, the live stream's still going on, right? Somebody just commented saying what happened to the live stream. I think maybe he was looking for it on the stories page or something. But anyway,
No, we're still live.
We're still live, yeah. So Bryce, I think before X decides to cut us short at 17 minutes, I don't know where we are in that. No, in fact, we've crossed 20 minutes already on your profile.
All right.
So that
It might just be the profile.
of my phone for some reason. Okay, great. So now that we don't have any time limit, let's head straight into what everyone's here tuned into for.
This is so embarrassing. Like I've never talked about this in public. My friends know it. My close business associates know because it just comes up. I've worked with the same folks in crypto for like 10 years. Kamal Hubbard, probably my best friend in the world. We've been through thick and thin and good times and bad times. And he runs a newsletter called Cage Chain. I strongly suggest you subscribe. It's a great newsletter for crypto. It'll give you insights on AI and crypto that you won't get anywhere else. And people know. That's why I say if you know, you know. It's the biggest open secret in crypto. And we'll talk about why. Because all the evidence has been there the entire time.
Yeah, so of course I think everyone by now, it's sort of an open secret over the last couple of hours about who wrote the white paper, and we'll come to that, right? But what I'd love to know is what led on to that particular moment. And honestly, I think there are two aspects about Bryce. When this came to me, there were two clear aspects about Bryce that really convinced me on why this is not just another Satoshi, right? Not just another
Well, you
Satoshi.
gave it away there,
Kamiwa.
didn't you?
I did. I mean, I think it's pretty much come to that now. But there are two things. If you really look at it, and I've really not had any cross questioning with Bryce as such. But there are just two aspects that really fill in the gap for me, and this is for someone who is like a big time Satoshi conspiracy theorist. So the two traits essentially are, one, of course, his story is possibly the only story that explains the disappearance of Satoshi, right? None of the other stories really talk about why Satoshi disappeared and what happened to him after that. So that, and even with the timeline, that perfectly adds up. And the second most important part is the persona of Satoshi, right? If you really go through Bryce's X timeline, if you really spend talking at least an hour with Bryce on his ideological view of the world, you will know that this guy has to be the guy behind the white paper, right? Because Satoshi is clearly someone who is not afraid to flirt with the law. Satoshi is not someone who really loves to, who probably not shy away from flaunting the finger to the authority. And that is Bryce for you. That is Bryce for you. I'll probably.
It's embarrassing, but I mean, go ahead.
I'll probably, yeah, Bryce, if you just want to tell us like some of your earlier ideological influences, maybe your early trysts with law, to whatever extent you're comfortable talking and sharing with the community, and how all of that eventually led up to that moment, of you, being part of this moment, and of course your collaborator, if you want to talk about that as well.
Yeah, well, and I think that's an important thing. I think we should talk about the collaboration first, because I
Sure.
can't take all the credit.
Sure.
I didn't do it alone. And if first thing, I have the background, math and software engineering. But I wasn't a cryptography guy. And I worked for a Fortune 500 that had an office in Santa Barbara, California. And I guess we could talk about it a little bit. I mean, you really should buy the story for all the details. So we're going to go into some of the, we're going to kind of gloss over the high notes. But the idea actually came from my ex-wife, who was an accountant. And before anything happened, this was like 2006, 2007, like early 2007. My ex-wife and I were all sitting around the dinner table, and she says, I work with spreadsheets all day, and all these spreadsheets, they all talk about the same thing. It's all money. Why do people have millions of spreadsheets? Why isn't there one spreadsheet that contains everything that everybody in the whole world works off of? And I went, that's an interesting idea. I've never even heard of that. And I went back to work a couple days later. It was like a Friday. And I got back to work on Monday, and I asked one of my coworkers, what he thought of the idea. Because, we're a Fortune 500 company. In fact, we dealt with HIPAA data. So it was like a big data analysis company. We used like R and all kinds of stuff. Code languages nobody's ever heard of unless you do biostatistical analysis and that level of stuff. And he says, "Oh, you got to see this. I read this white paper a few months ago, and it talks about exactly what you're talking about." But they never did it. And what it was a white paper written by MIT, their computer science lab, and the NSA. And it was way back from 1996. And you can actually Google this. It's called How to Make an Electronic Mint. And the concept was absolutely mind-blowing, because it was exactly what my ex-wife was talking about. Except it had some things in it that we didn't like. Like, you needed banks in the process in order to, banks essentially minted the electronic money. And that was no good, because that really didn't solve anything. And, this was when, and again, if you think about early 2007, this was when people were just starting to ring the alarm bells about the coming financial crisis. So this was kind of a hot topic. If you paid attention to economics, people could see the train coming down the tracks. It just hadn't hit yet. And I took a couple days and I digested it and I kicked it around, and I talked about it with the guy at work. He's like, I don't want to deal with this. But Santa Barbara is a very small town, but there's an enormous university in there, University of California, Santa Barbara, UCSB. And as a result, there's a lot of really, really smart people in town. And one of those people was Hal Finney. And Hal lived just a couple miles from me. And my coworker set us up, with an email introduction. And I took him out to dinner to a place called Holdren's Steakhouse, which is just a phenomenal restaurant on State Street in Santa Barbara. And it was funny because Hal and I were never really friends. We knew each other. We did a lot of stuff together. But we were not friends. We were like two different kinds of people. He was a health guy, like he didn't eat steak. He had a salad. But I had like surf and turf. And I smoked cigarettes and stuff, and he ran marathons. So it was really this dichotomy of personalities, and I think that was really what made it work. So when you say wrote the white paper, that was not at the time. Right now I write academic papers for publication and peer review. At the time, not so much. In fact, I could say that it was Hal that taught me how to do that. And he produced the first draft, And then I sort of went through and did the editing because people knew Hal, people didn't know me. They knew his style and his language, his use of language and that sort of thing. And he convinced me very early on that we needed to keep things anonymous. And, I kind of saw I didn't really get it at first, to be honest with you, the need to be anonymous. But he explained it to me like in this way. He says, imagine if this is successful. Do you have the means to protect your family if this breaks wide and becomes a thing? And I went, that's an excellent point. Okay, that's a good point. Thank you very much. And that's when we decided on the pseudonym, which you're gonna have to read the story for where the name came from. I'm not gonna talk about it here. But I was the one that came up with the name Satoshi Nakamoto, and there's actually a history behind that of where it came from my childhood. And in fact, one of the jokes was, if you know anything about Japanese, the surname, your family name comes first. So, just as kind of an inside joke, we Americanized it by reversing it. So, if it was really a Japanese guy, the name would be Nakatomo. Right, that, tongue-tied. Satoshi. Yeah. But instead, it's Satoshi Nakamoto. And, a lot of the discussions, and I think that, again, you could read the story for a lot of it, but I think what would be good here is to fill in some of the blanks that maybe lots of people don't know. So, like, number one, the keys are destroyed. They don't exist. The coins will never move. Ever, ever, ever. Ever, ever, ever. And I have never been in crypto for the money. Like, I'm doing it now because I got stuff that I want to pay for, like documentaries and major motion pictures and my research. And I want to include people in that. I don't want to just own it. That's, when you talk about that's my personality. And I make jokes to my friends and my family sometimes. Every time Satoshi's name appears on a list of, the world's richest people, I laugh because I'm not. I've always said that I'm working class crypto. I'm in the trenches like everybody else. And throughout my and we were talking about this the other day, throughout my entire career in crypto, I was put on trial by Bitcoin Talk because people kept saying I was a scammer and a fraud and all this stuff because I never made any money, right? They couldn't tell, what I was doing in crypto. It was just for the fun of it. It was. If I could do it as Satoshi, I wanted to be able to do it as Bryce because that was me. And that's why I never said anything about it. This is the first time ever. I'm not trying to launch, millions of blockchains. I'm not going to file patents. I'm not that fuckhead Craig Wright, and fuck that guy. You want to search my timeline for the letters CSW, you will see exactly what I think of other people who have tried to take credit for my work. In fact, I even called myself the greatest existential threat to Craig's career. But that was before the Copa lawsuit, which of course ended his career. Thank God. I think that was probably the best thing the Bitcoin community has ever done, was get rid of that asshole. And I mean, I've made Medium posts and stuff, and just completely unrelated, I'll put a picture of Craig Wright. Here's a picture of Craig Wright just to say fuck him, because I absolutely hate that dude with unreserved hatred. And that sort of, because if you think about it, the one thing that no one has ever explained is what the heck could be more important than Bitcoin. One of the last okay, so here's how it worked. While we were developing the software throughout 2007 and 2008, because that's really when we started it, Hal and I would talk about it. What this means, what that means, what the implications are, this, that, and the other thing. And then after we launched, if you go back through the conversations that occurred between Hal and Satoshi on Bitcoin Talk, those were the conversations that he and I had while we were developing it. So I don't want to say they were staged, but we already knew the answers to what we were talking about. We'd already had these conversations before. So when they came up from the community, we answered them. I mean, it was that simple. And, the very last thing I did was send an email to Mike Hearn. Hi, Mike. And said, I've just got more important things to do. And to this day, no one has been able to say what possibly more important could there have been. Well, the more important thing to do was my daughter. And in April of 2011, if you watch the first parts of the live streams, I had already left my wife. I had already cashed out my 401k. I had just closed on the apartment building a couple weeks before. And the last thing I had to do was, quite frankly, tell the Bitcoiners to fuck off. Because I was not going to be around anymore. Everything was in very good hands. Gavin Andreessen, hi Gavin. Jeff Garzik, hi Jeff. They had it in hand. And I mean, history proves that to be correct. Any problem that came up, be it the infinite, the buffer overflows, where they literally had to hard fork the network to fix it, or what was some of the other stuff that happened? Oh, there was a bug. So there's this, okay, not a lot of people know this. There's only one place in the code that I used bitwise operations, if you know anything about math and coding. And I'm shit at bitwise operations, absolutely terrible at it. And I made a mistake in the code for the block rewards. And in doing so, it created infinite inflation. So when the block reward halves, every so many, every few years, it halves and then it reaches 0. And then based on the bitwise operator, it goes back up to 50. So it would have started minting 50 Bitcoin per block all over again. That was a problem. And it wasn't until 2015. So I was already launching like altcoins and stuff. And hi, not so fast. Mined all my coins. Somebody found it and fixed it. I didn't even know it was there. In fact, it was that same mistake was in all the code from the forks of Bitcoin that I had made as altcoins. I just carried the mistake over, unless I was doing funky stuff with the block rewards. But and it was called the April Fool's Day patch. And it went in very silently with very little fanfare, because until April 1st, 2015, Bitcoin had infinite coins. It wasn't really hard money. And if nobody had caught that, I have no idea what would have happened in the future. I mean, it would have been it would have killed the network. So, and I don't remember the name of the guy who found it and patched it, but man, kudos to you. You saved Bitcoin. And you are an unsung hero of Bitcoin. And quite frankly, I'm really ashamed I don't remember your name, because you deserve credit for that. You absolutely saved Bitcoin before. And this is after all of the people, all Bitcoin Core, and all the developers, and all the hundreds and thousands of people who had gone through the code. Nobody found the mistake but this one guy. So, that's some of the some unknown and little known Bitcoin lore. I don't really know how to talk about it, because this has just been my life. And I can guess at what people might find interesting and what they might want to talk about. But like a lot of it is already out there. If you go, if you follow Pete Rizzo on X, the Bitcoin historian. Hi, Pete. I met him back in 2015 at the Miami Bitcoin conference. I usually don't do conferences. I never did. I went to a few of the big ones, like Miami 2015 is infamous because it was the first time that everybody who was anybody in Bitcoin was there, including Vitalik. It was the only time I actually ever met Vitalik, and there's no pictures or nothing. He was just standing there out in front of the hotel talking to a bunch of folks, gawky teenager. And I just, hi, I just want to come up and shake your hand. And I did, and I walked away. That's been my sort of, because I don't want to take any thunder away from anybody in crypto. Like, I did my part. And I stepped away, and in stepping away, I sort of gave up the opportunity of being that guy. But I can talk, but now that also means I can talk about it. And so, like, I'm sure, so my issue is I really don't know what else there is to discuss other than where it came from and the name and stuff. Like, for instance, I didn't pick the name. Bitcoin that was Hal. That wasn't me. And he actually designed and coded a lot of it. I did the networking on IRC. Oh, I remember now. Here's something we talked about. So my dad was a computer science professor at Northern Kentucky University. And he taught Java and C and C++. And I like to say, if my dad were a carpenter, I'd be building cabinets. But he was a computer science professor with an MBA, so I made cryptocurrencies. And he was almost a degenerate gambler. He loved games of chance, especially ones with decent probability or calculable probability, like poker and Keno and horse racing. He loved horse racing, Keno, and poker. And he wrote a poker game. And the first version of Bitcoin that we released on SourceForge has my dad's poker game in it. So, and I've talked to folks, I like to talk to folks about it and, not just to see what their opinions are. And I used to be a member of the ACJR until they kicked me out for being a dick. Which is I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's an association of crypto journalists and reporters. I think that's what ACJR stands for. And they didn't like me very much because I kept telling them they were dumb and, racist and, privileged and that sort of thing. I didn't like that. But one guy was talking about how, and this was something actually my dad had told me when I was a kid, was that you can code, software is like fingerprints. And you can tell who coded what based on how they use the software, how they use the code. So there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat, but most developers skin a cat 3 or 4 different ways. And this guy could tell that there were at least 2 developers on the Bitcoin source code, but the poker game was something completely different. It wasn't coded anything like the rest of the software. And that's because my dad wrote it. And I stole his code. And I told him about it later, and he didn't give a shit. It's not open source except for when it was in Bitcoin. And I kind of shoehorned it in so you could use Bitcoin as poker chips. And it was sort of like just a way to illustrate how the tokens that the network generated could be perceived very, very, very easily as money. And, after a while, we removed it and no longer used IRC because IRC ops got really pissed off at all the network traffic, and we were piggybacking off of them. So, we had to remove that. We removed a lot of stuff that was not in there, that was in version 0.1 but isn't anymore. And quite honestly, I'm at best a halfway decent software engineer, especially in C or C++ and C. It's not my preferred language. But it was necessary at the time because Python just sucked, back in that day. And C could do all of the things that we needed it to do in the level of efficiency that we needed it to do it in. So the fact that Bitcoin Core came along and basically rewrote the entire code base, good on them. It needed it, frankly. You can see, I have joked about stuff like this for my entire crypto career and never actually said why. I have said, Satoshi codes like a 6th grader. And people were like, oh, but he was a genius. I'm like, yeah, he's a fucking idiot. That's literally how I've talked about it my whole career. Because I know things that other people didn't. And I'm not doing this, like I said, I'm famous for being me. And this is just a part of who I am. And that's why when I talk about the story, it's just another facet. It's not the primary focus. Because it never, for me, and we talked about this several times over the last week. For me, it was never my focus. It was a hobby. It was, some guys will set up a garage full of tools and rebuild cars or whatever. This is what I did. And I'd actually done stuff like this for my whole life, much to my ex-wife's dismay. Written large software packages for free because it was fun and I enjoyed it. And it was just one more thing that I enjoyed doing. So I don't know where else to go with this.
Yeah, I mean,
like I said, it's just my life.
I can definitely vouch for this. Like, I know this must be a little radical for you to grasp right now, but then every time, like for me, like I said, when I reached chapter 6 of what Bryce published, right, which you can read on StoriesDotFun as well, I was like, what? Like, how is this not like the dominant narrative of his life? Because it meant so much for me. And every time I speak to Bryce, it's always about his daughter. And then I'm like, dude, you're Satoshi. You know what I mean? Like, but for him, it's like, okay, yeah, I mean, that's something I did, but you know, it's just a part of my life. It's one of the many things that I did, and it's true. If the more you talk to Bryce, you realize that writing the white paper, working with Hal was just one of the many side gigs that he really did in his life, right? And probably, I'm not sure if you want to share some of them with the community today, but...
And I'm not trying to, and I think this is really important. I don't want to take away, because I know, believe me, I know, a lot of people feel the way you do. And I'm not trying to take away from that at all. I'm not. In fact, the fact that it means so much to you is you. You know, if it inspired you to do things, and I've always said the way to change the world with cryptocurrency is to own it and use it and change your own life with it. Because as we change a little bit and a little bit and a little bit, eventually it changes the whole world. So, you know, I am not as important to the story as you or as the folks watching. That's really what's important. And I want to be, that's why I'm like trying to be very careful about how we talk about this, because I don't want to take away from that. I don't want anyone to look to me like that guy, because you're that guy. I just wrote the software. The folks that made it what it is today are people exactly like you. And that's why when people say Satoshi is everybody, I'm all about that. That's absolutely how I feel about it. But it ties into the story. Like if you look through the tweet, my pinned tweet, when I talked about mining, okay, so I guess we can talk about this. So the keys are destroyed, right? The million BTC that we mined really, really early on, never going to move ever. Keys are gone. But I did filter some through empty GOPS. So when, you know, even today, when you move coins through an exchange and then withdraw it, it's like a black hole. Like there's nothing that connects up that value except the exchange itself. So when the exchange disappears, so does all that information. And the implosion of MT Gox was probably the best thing that ever happened, because Mark Karpelès was a jerk. But that's where I was able to get coins out and store them long term and have it not be connected to anything else. Now, I'll just go ahead and say this. So like Circle, right, USDC, Circle back in the day when they first started, they had an app where you could buy and sell Bitcoin, which is relatively common now. But back in the day, they were the first to do that. And I used them almost exclusively until Gemini from the Winklevoss twins came online. And you could see that as well. And if you pair up the fact that I never really extracted much money out of any of the networks that I launched with, and I didn't think to do it, but the wallets I have on Gemini, the Winklevoss twins can see it, right? I've moved hundreds of BTC through that wallet. And literally, those coins not only helped bring home my daughter, because I had more than 150, it was about 1,000. They supported me for 10 years. Now, that money's gone. I spent it. Am I as sad because now it's, over 100,000? Maybe I should have been a little more greedy. But I would not trade the last 10, 15 years for anything. Like, I got to travel the world. I got to lobby Congress. If you go up on my Instagram, you'll see pictures of me with congressmen and senators. And all of that was made possible, and not only me, but my lawyer, my business partners. I had a career in Hollywood doing music, and with my last project, and all of that was made possible by the Bitcoin I mined early on. Nobody ever asked where that money came from, which is why everybody thought I was a scammer, because I had to be scamming somewhere, but nobody could figure out where. Well, I actually wasn't. That's why they couldn't figure it out, because I was just spending the coins that I had just laying around.
So we've got some questions
Yeah.
coming in from the community. You guys can feel free to send in some of the questions. I think someone says, I need a clip of that shiz. Okay.
And the interesting thing that Bryce forgot to mention about the computer. If
Oh.
you want to share that?
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
okay.
Oh
So-
yeah, guys, this is like, Bryce, I'm going to take the liberty of doing this on air. Do you want to auction it or something?
I don't. I mean, we could. It's junk. Okay, it doesn't work. Power supply's removed, but I have the original computer that I coded all this stuff on, and I still have it. Like I had it, and I just held on to it. I don't know why, but it's currently sitting in storage in Santa Barbara, and the drives are in it. But I haven't fired up that PC in over 10 years. So there's, I don't know what's left on it. There's probably a version of an old-ass version of Bitcoin on there somewhere. I'm almost positive of that. But, I really haven't powered on that machine since 2013. So I don't, but, it's it's a Dell Inspiron 521. It wasn't even a great computer at the time. It was like mid-market, a mid-market PC. I think I got it like 2006 or something. It was even old when I was doing all this. So it wasn't even the latest technology at the time. But the drives are still in it. And I don't know if their drives are readable, if they'll fire up or anything like that. But I think it would be fun to what I compared it to was Al Capone's vault. Maybe there's something in it. Maybe not. I don't know. But I think it would be fun maybe we could fundraise something where we could open up the computer, and if the drives don't work, we might be able to send them off to Palo Alto or something and have some company crack the case open and try and read the platter directly. Because there might be some stuff, there might be some nostalgia on there. And because, again, I cannot say this enough. The keys are gone. They don't exist. Satoshi's coins will never, ever, ever move. And in fact, that was when Craig, I can't help but mention this bastard's name. When Craig Wright first appeared on the scene, he did that mathematical sleight of hand with being able to sign a message with using the keys, or using a pseudo key, as it were, which was how I knew instantaneously. I mean, not only because I was there, but that his career days were numbered, because I know the truth. I was impressed, mind you, but I kind of shared the disdain for Gavin Andreessen that everyone else did by backing him. Like, dude, you know better than this. You know better than this. And I was really kind of ashamed of the way that he behaved during that. But, Craig is a fucker. And we all know the truth now, so I guess we can stop talking about him after this. But
Bryce, just curious, so at what point did you realize that what you had built together with Hal was probably much bigger than what you thought it would be? Or
it was in 2013 when I had realized that I still had some, and that it could potentially, because I had spent I had run out of money. And the fact that it could potentially revive, bring my daughter home and give me the funds necessary to secure her return. I didn't really immerse myself in the community, but I did look around, and I saw the conferences and the exchanges and just the trajectory that it was on, and even the price action. It went from a nickel. The first trades on MTGOX were a nickel in 2010. Was it 2010? Yeah, it was. Early 2010. And the price action was ridiculous. And I when it kept going up, when it got up around 500, that was one thing. But then, when at the end of 2013 was when A16Z announced that they were going in big, and they put a $5 million investment into Coinbase, which nobody had ever fucking heard of, before then. And that's when the price went parabolic for the second time, and it hit $1,000.
Wow.
And $1,000 Bitcoin in 2013 was nothing to shake a stick at.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized that, number one, this was going to go places, and number two, Hal was right. Like, you either have enough money to where it's like that there was this really dangerous period to be Satoshi between about 2012 and 2015, because it wasn't worth enough that you'd be able to expend all of the funds necessary to keep yourself and your families and your aunts and your uncles and your grandmothers safe from people trying to, beat them with lead pipes to get your money. And it actually being worth something. And to this day, I am grateful for Hal's prescience in that regard, because I never would have saw that coming without his help. And it was him that let's use VPNs, and let's keep this on the down low and that sort of thing. And for who he was, he didn't care, right? Because he was Hal Finney. He was already Hal Finney. And that meant a lot, I said we were never really friends, but he did care at least that much, and that to this day speaks to his character as a man, that he didn't have to, but he did. And my family is grateful for that to this day. Oh, I was wondering about something else. I just lost it. There's so much, trying to think about back in the day. Like, Hal was already sick when all this stuff happened to me, and that was a little bit depressing on my part. And I wasn't there when he passed on. I was already doing stuff. But I am forever grateful. Forever grateful. That it wasn't the biggest thing I'd ever done, I wouldn't say. At the time, it didn't feel as big as it is now. But I wouldn't trade it for anything. I mean, not anything. Even for all the pain that I went through and everything else, everything happened exactly as it should. And why change what works? If it's not broken, don't fix it.
Cool, guys. So, oh, it's already in. It's ended.
Did it end?
No, it's still on.
Oh, good.
It's on. But I think, Bryce, you've been speaking for an hour continuously. Probably should break for a bit.
Right.
Yeah, so we can resume our next space probably another hour from now. I'm guessing that's a lot for the community to fathom, to take in. If there's any question, follow-up question that you guys have, feel free to tag me, StoriesDotFun, or Bryce directly. We'd love to address it in the next session that we have. Meanwhile, if you're curious to know, there are a lot more details that Bryce has mentioned about his story in the draft that he's published on StoriesDotFun. Feel free to go out and read that. We are updating it as we talk. It's going to probably be a 3-part release. We release part 1, part 2 should be out in a few minutes, and then part 3 probably in a few days from now. And I think the more I think about it, I think there are just so many more utilities that I can think of for the token. But you already know some of the utilities that are already out there. One is the documentary mention. Then, of course, the motion picture mentioned to be a part of it. Bryce, of course, has committed, and so are we at StoriesDotFun. We would love to buy back tokens of, DAD tokens and...
Oh, and I think was it a couple of your high-powered folks in your community had talked about like an anime or a graphic novel.
Yeah.
So, this is not, even with the stuff that we already have on deck, this is going to keep growing as time goes on. And you guys will be a part of it every step of the way. So, even with the buybacks and everything else, the incentives are just going to keep increasing.
Absolutely. Yep, so cool. We'll see you probably in another hour from now.
Sounds good.
And if you have any questions, please feel free to tag us. And see you in an hour.
All right.
Okay, guys, so we'll just wait for like 100 folks to join in. We're 67 now. Meanwhile, just set some context for this live stream. One, this is the last live stream for today. I guess energy levels are sort of dwindling in the room, and we got to kind of, pick ourselves back for tomorrow. Second, remember, this is actually a real human with a real story, a phenomenal story and an impactful story. So the shelf life for this token, for this narrative, is going to be for a very, very long time. So you're definitely going to hear a lot more from us over the next couple of days, months, and years. And most certainly, a lot more proactively from us at Stories and Bryce together, at least in the next 48 hours or so. And then, unfortunately, I think the team will have to fly back. And of course, we'll definitely very much be in touch with Bryce and see how we can coordinate this together. Utility section on the website, the full story, part 1 of Bryce's story is live. It ends with chapter 6, which is where Bryce essentially talks about his Bitcoin, early contribution to Bitcoin. Then there is chapter 7, 8, 9, which we will release very soon. Although you don't have to pay twice for the content. If you bought $9 worth of Stories token, that's enough for you to consume both part 1 and part 2. And I think there are some very interesting questions we received over the last 1 hour. And I'm going to take them one by one. Although the first one, I'm going to kind of respond to it first and then let Bryce take it though, just to set some context, because it'll be much better that way. So let me take the first question. Okay, I doesn't show up on my timeline now though, but then there was this one tweet that said, convince us. Right? And I think I want to take this first on behalf of Bryce actually. So when, like I said, I think when I really reached out to Bryce first, and when Bryce essentially put out his story out in the public domain, the Bitcoin bit didn't feature anywhere, right? It was essentially his life story about saving his daughter. Somewhere in the entire narrative was squeezed in the bit that, okay, some years ago he kind of co-authored this white paper, revolutionary white paper with his collaborator called Hal Finney. And I think the best way to approach this with Bryce is that Bryce doesn't care. Like, honestly, I mean, he doesn't care. Like, he doesn't give two hoots about trying to prove that he's Satoshi, right? He'd rather go like hours and hours talking about how he rescued his daughter. He'll probably go spend hours talking about how he, about his equation with his dad. Bryce doesn't care. For him, like, his Bitcoin endeavor is one of the many things that he's done, and probably the one that's the most popular.
Well, let me kind of book it in a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, you're right to an extent. Like, it's not. I have always said that inventing Bitcoin was the least interesting thing Satoshi has ever done. In fact, and you can even find this on my timeline, Satoshi's disappearance, I still talk about it in third person, I always have, is more of an indication of who he is as a person than anything that was said or done, because that was a performance. It was clearly a performance. People realized it at the time. And I know people have taken all of the posts that we made because sometimes it was me and sometimes it was Hal. And like, put them in leather-bound books like Gideon Bibles and stuff. That kind of thing I am not interested in anything like that. Like, just to kind of restate, to me, rescuing my daughter was the best thing I've ever done. Being her father was the greatest accomplishment of my life. And, okay, maybe Bitcoin is a second, but it's a distant second. I think that anybody could have done what I did when it comes to Bitcoin. But I don't think anyone could have rescued my daughter and brought her home safely. And she's almost 30 years old now. She's got her own life. And she's happy, which how many people could say that? Even after everything that we've been through. So, for me, this is just fun. But this is crypto, and I get it. I mean, I'm not trying to, tell people not to pay attention to it because clearly I mentioned it. But I don't want the real person of who I am to be lost, and that's why I've always participated in crypto as myself since 2013, because I'm way more interesting than Satoshi ever could have been.
Yeah. So, I mean, the point I was trying to make is that the best way to really convince yourself really is to really ask the right questions. I think that's the best way to dig in and get information.
Yeah, let me go ahead and restate that real quick. Yeah. Somebody is already doing AI-assisted research, and I've encouraged them to post it in the community to allow others to contribute to verify it themselves. Because I can't convince you. If the identity of Satoshi is important to you, then it's worth looking into, at least if in your own mind, to eliminate me or accept it. Like, it's not about convincing, it's not about trusting me, it's about accepting it or denying it. That's really the question. And nobody can do that but you.
Yeah, so having said that, I think this guy has actually come up with some interesting criterias. If you want to respond to any of them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So first of all of the accounts, Bitcoin Talk, the email account, the P2P Foundation account, all of those things were hacked like a decade ago. So that's not proof. The keys are gone. We deleted them. So signing a message, which has always been kind of like the gold standard, is useless because of course, fuckhead Craig faked it. So it's already been proved that the keys can be manipulated to sign messages in ways that are not accurate, but close enough to fool people who want to be fooled. So, what was some of the other things he mentioned?
Sign a message with a known Satoshi address.
Yeah,
the keys are gone.
That's no good.
Share early drafts of code or the white paper.
Okay, so if those exist, I do still have the PC. Now, granted, I deleted everything. Emails, sent inboxes, you have to figure Satoshi has been an enigma for this long because we did it right. And we were successful in burying it. And, how do you undo that? Well, okay, maybe it's on the hard drive. Like, I know that there's a couple of early versions of Bitcoin on that hard drive. I know it. I don't know what version it is. It could be like 0.6.4. It could be 0.1. I really, honestly, truly do not remember. I cannot say that I remember at all. But asking for early versions is a great idea because that's even what I have used in order to argue timelines. Okay, so this is interesting. The first, and this is all stuff that's been in public, the first Bitcoin source code was actually posted in 2008. And we restarted the blockchain in 2009 for the launch. That's why, because you'll note that the CZ timestamp, the string about from Japan Times, that is from 2009. So you can't, backdate that or invent it. but we did post an early version of the code in 2008, which means if you consider the amount of engineering work that had to be done to make the key encoding work, to make the block mining system work, because that's, and the transaction spending, the opcodes, the scripting language. Those are the three components that basically are Bitcoin. You know, everything else has been swapped out and modified and all this other stuff. But you have to figure, you know, if you have any experience in software engineering at all, 6 months to do something like that, especially with just two guys, you know, hammering away at it, is really, really fast. It was actually about 9 months that it took. So, you know, the Bitcoin, we started development actually in 2007. And the network itself didn't launch until 2009. So and people don't consider it that way. You know, like, you know, the code came down, you know, from the bosom of Athena or whatnot. But that's just not how it happened. Like, you know, there was work that had to go into it, research that had to go into it. And granted, we did have the MIT white paper as a blueprint. So that you know, accelerated. Otherwise, it might have taken over a year or longer. But someone had already done the hard research as to what kind of system would work. That kind of leads us to something you wanted to talk about, which was some of the political leanings. Like, so everybody, a lot of folks say that Nick Szabo was involved. So first of all, Nick Szabo is a fascist Nazi fuck. Fuck that guy too. And proof of work, if you think about the actual verbiage, and I don't even know if Adam Back realizes this, because, you know, he's kind of become a bit of a grifter himself. The only thing he did was come up with Hashcash, and he ain't come up with anything new since. Proof of work creates tokens, which are monetized units of labor. If you sit back and you think about any philosopher, any economist ever in the history of the world who has ever talked about monetized units of labor as a form of money, that's Karl Marx. It's going to upset a lot of people. But that's okay, because it doesn't work unless you combine all sorts of different philosophies. You have monetized units of labor, but it doesn't work unless it's inside of a capitalist system. That's what exchanges are. It doesn't work any other way. There's the libertarian ideology of, you know, self-sovereignty and self-identification, which is built in. That was Hal's work. You know, and so there's almost this tripod of philosophies upon which Bitcoin operates. I'm telling you, the Chinese did not fall in love with libertarian idealism. They fell in love with the communist idealism that lies at the core of proof of work. People are going to hate that. But it's true. I was the crazy leftist. I've been a crazy leftist my whole life. Back in the 90s, in the early 2000s, I worked on marijuana legalization, in specifically Prop 215 in California, and it worked. And I've been involved in the protests during the pandemic. We got pictures of that. I got caught at a protest by TMZ. And I don't know if I want to share that link or not, because that was a pretty ornery protest, and it's still pretty fresh. But it was the last administration, maybe wrong. But I have the receipts, I'll put it that way. I have a long history of speaking truth to power, and successfully speaking truth to power. And being on the right side of history is the way that I like to think about it. And that may not be very popular. You know, in fact, I posted something, a friend of a friend was one of the guys who fell off the greenhouse in Camarillo in Oxnard when the ice came to raid a pot farm, Glass House Farms. And I actually know the guys from Glass House Farms. And he died. And I just posted a single tweet, not either way, just sort of empathetic to what happened to him, and noticed how many people that don't care about politics got pissed off about ice raids suddenly. Like suddenly they're all about being politically active. And I got like the internet hate machine in 5th gear, like hundreds of hate tweets on that. And like people, of course, saw my pin tweet and they're like, oh, you want what happened to your daughter to happen to everybody else. You got to kick out the illegals and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, I'm a math guy, right? I like statistics. And if you look at people who abduct and rape children in the United States, they're overwhelmingly white American citizens. In fact, which exceeds their representation in the population. Nobody wants to hear that. Everybody wants to be afraid of the other guy, afraid of illegals. Well, you know what? If it were true, I would say it were true. I would say, you know what, you're right. We should get out the illegals. They're to blame, blah, blah, blah. But it's not. In fact, what happened to me and my family was an unfortunate exception. It's not the rule. And that is why I say the things I do, why I don't hate Mexicans, why I'm not afraid of Latinos. Because that's just not, this was a one-off. And it was more likely that it would happen to that one of my neighbors would have done it than somebody who was in this country illegally, which he was. Not going to lie. You know, it is what it is. But that wasn't the motivator for what caused this tragedy. It was a fucking pervert. And perverts come in all shapes and colors. Full stop. So, you know, I think you were the first person to ever really bring this up, that there's a valid argument to be made about the kind of person who could come up with something like this, the way that it was implemented. And I think that, you know, I'm going to go back to the fact that Hal Finney and I were two completely polar opposite different people. And it was because of both of our contributions that it worked. Like, I will absolutely grant that it probably wouldn't have worked any other way. I don't think a single human being could have come up with this. And nobody could have duplicated it on their own. It had to be the people that we were.
Okay, so some of the other things, emails you addressed saying that they were all deleted strategically. Deep technical foresight, okay, that's pretty much addressed through the conversation.
I mean, okay, so I mean, talk about that. 15 years of engineering, and I'm a math nerd. Yeah. And if you don't believe I'm a math nerd, I literally published 3 papers which are intractable mathematics. Like, it looks like gobbledygook. If you're not familiar with it, believe me, I know exactly what you mean. My kid looks at it and goes, "What dirt?" But the link in my profile is to my scientific ID, my OCR ID, which has links to my published peer-reviewed papers. You can go and look. I know math. I love math. I've always loved math. I wasn't a cryptographer. I wouldn't claim to be a cryptographer. That was how. But because of my mathematics and software engineering background, I could get it. I could learn. And I learned quickly. So, you know, it is what it is. And that's also a valid point.
Recall obscure early Bitcoin details. I think that also, we discussed some of the early bugs.
Yeah, I mean, like, I've forgotten more about Bitcoin and crypto than most people will ever know. I totally admit that. This is not anything and I think that it's important to remember that my daughter disappeared in August of 2010. Like, my life changed forever. I literally became a different person. And then when it was over, I had to become somebody else again. Because that monster that I turned into was not suitable to be in public. Right. You know, that's not an individual you can be in a civil society. And you know, do you remember what you were doing 20 years ago? Because if you do, you know, you're one up on me. But, you know, the evidence that does still exist, I did talk about this on forums. There was one forum in particular, and someone actually already found it. It was called amcon.net, amkon.net. And it exists in the Wayback Machine. It has been indexed by Wayback Machine. but it doesn't exist anymore. It's no longer online. And back in the day, we did talk about the concepts that became Bitcoin. There were enough individuals of sufficient, quite frankly, intelligence and experience that they were a great sounding board. And some of them, for instance, and I'll name one of them right now, Andy Murray. He is on Twitter. If he wants to reveal his, because I don't want to out people and have them be subjected to this insanity if they don't want it. If he wants to, he can participate. I will, in fact, we're friends on Facebook still too. I'll send him a message and see if he wants to chime in.
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool.
But he remembers. He was one of the primary people that like another guy was Kim Walker, who passed away, unfortunately, and he was also a leftist. And he was brilliant. Like, he was an old 1960s leftist. Like, that's how old he was, and he passed on. But Andy's still around. I'll ask him and see if he wants to chime in on his experiences and the things that we talked about in 2007, 2008, as we were kind of developing the ideas of Bitcoin. Because because he knows, I've absolutely thanked him, like personally thanked him for his participation. And he's like, holy shit, that was you? That's what we were doing? And I was like, yeah. So, because I didn't tell anybody what we were doing. But, like, he knows. So, like, these people do exist. There are real people who know, who were there, who were my sounding boards for these things, even if they didn't know it.
Provide old files with original timestamps.
Again, most of it's been sanitized. The drives are, so I have the PC, like I mentioned.
Yeah.
The drives are in the PC. We all know that things are, when you delete some stuff, I don't know how thorough I was in deleting it. I'll put it that way. I did shred a lot of it. If you're familiar with data shredders, it overwrites the sectors so they can't be recovered. I don't know how much, I can't remember how much of that I did. I may not have shredded everything. So maybe. Like I said, I haven't fired up that PC in 12 years. So, there's some technical hurdles to even getting it to turn on, because it's a 12-year-old computer with 12-year-old hardware. But maybe. I mean, fuck, it's worth a shot.
Yeah.
Like, if there's enough interest in this and we can raise the money to actually do it, we could get the drives, send them off to somewhere, have them, you need a clean room, right? Open them up and see what data can be extracted from the platters. I think that would be fun.
Yeah, that'd be fun for sure. I mean, that'd be pretty cool. I think we should plan an event around
that's as good as I can do.
Yeah.
Like, everything else we absolutely hosed.
Let's
like, it's
discuss this
done.
actually. I think this would make for a good event for the
Some
community
additional
as well.
utility, perhaps?
Yeah.
We'll think about how to get that done.
Yeah.
I think that's a fun idea.
Awesome. Reveal device logs or IPs from 2008 to 10.
Same, except those were VPNs. I don't even remember what company I used. As soon as people started to dig into IP addresses and stuff. So, like, a lot of people know, again, all of this is in public, right? I'm not saying anything new here. It just might be new in this context.
Right.
People already know, you can find conspiracy theories all over about Satoshi being physically just a couple miles away from Hal. I'm the only guy. Like, I'm literally the only person because I know how to make blockchains and I live near Hal. Like, that's literally me. And also, I remember one of my friend Kamal showed me something a few years ago. I'd be damned if I can find it. When somebody from Homeland Security was talking about trying to, like, they said, yes, we sent a team to go investigate the origins of Satoshi, and we sent them to California to go dig into it, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, like, that was as close as I had ever come to having a full-on fucking panic attack. Because if they had narrowed it down to California, that means they were onto us. And Homeland Security probably knows. I am pretty much convinced that somewhere in either the domestic or international intelligence community has absolutely identified who I am. Like, I've been to Langley. So, like, I've got a hat and stuff. I got, like, a CIA hat and stuff that they gave me when I was there. But, like, it never came up. It was for other things. But this is like, it's not. People know, you know. People have dug into it, and they know. And they may not realize that they know, but they know. There's what I think is the most interesting thing about this since we started talking about it, and I really started to give it a lot of thought, was just how much of it is already in the public domain. And really, what I feel that I put in the story on StoriesDotFun is the missing pieces. Where if you put those missing pieces into that puzzle, suddenly a picture emerges. And I don't think any reasonable person would be able to say, okay, that's not him. He's lying, he's full of shit. I don't think anybody reasonable would be able to say that. I think you'd have to specifically either hate me because I liked altcoins and did all kinds of stuff that Bitcoiners don't like, or you just don't like me personally, you know. But, which I can accept either one. I'm okay with either one. I've been okay with being me for a very long time. That's not going to change now. So, either way, it is what it is. In the past, you can fake. Craig Wright proved that you can fake the unfakeable. But the thing you cannot fake is the past. It's already gone. It's already history. And it's the history that I think, if you're looking for an argument, history is the best argument. I was there.
Okay, any more questions? Okay, people are asking for pictures from that era. I think if you read the story on stories.fun, you'll find a lot of pictures from that.
Yeah, and some of the stuff that I'm still going through because the search functions in Facebook suck ass, are looking for posts that, because my Facebook, 99.999% of my Facebook posts are unedited. So when it has the date and timestamp, in Facebook, if you edit a post, it says edited. Well, these are all in situ. They have never been touched. And like one of the things that I contributed to the team, and I don't know if it's made it up on the website yet, was a Facebook post where from April, the first or second week of April of 2011, when I closed on the apartment building. And that apartment, when I got the apartment building, was me beginning to put my plan for public education into action. And it was just a couple weeks later that I told Bitcoiners to fuck off because I had other shit to do. Because I couldn't deal with it anymore. Stop emailing me. And essentially I literally had this, because I started to bow out in December of 2010 when my ex-wife and I knew that we were going to get divorced. We knew we were going to get separated. So I started, and frankly, Hal was getting sicker. So that's when I started to bow out. And I wasn't able to cut the cord until April of 2011 when I just could not deal with it anymore. And so, like, if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. It's why I never went back. And why I never resurrected Satoshi ever after that. Because it was so far gone and it had evolved so much. And quite frankly, I was a bit of a dick about it. Fuck off. Like, I didn't say fuck off, but if you've ever read the emails, which Mike has published, fuck off. Like, that is literally, fuck off. Yeah. That was absolutely my tone. So, it is what it is. Like I said, most of the stuff is out there, and there are pictures of me and my kid, There's pictures of us in Santa Barbara, if you're looking to place me in the city. Like, yeah, I could post stuff from all that summer. We went camping at a campground called Live Oaks, which was in July or August, and we were at the Santa Barbara Solstice Festival in April, which my ex-wife and I actually dressed up for it. So we were in costume and stuff. Like, that's what we have. I don't know what pictures and stuff people want. I wasn't screenshotting, hey, I want to prove I'm Satoshi someday. Because specifically the reason for adopting the name, the pseudonym, the identity of somebody that didn't exist was so I could have a life outside of it. And it wouldn't impact things unless I ever broke the secrecy. Well, now, so far, after Craig Wright and everybody else, and so much time has elapsed, who cares? Like, people may not even, well, I don't want to say that. But, who cares?
True. So I think what we're going to try and do over this week
Are we still on? Just want to make sure we're...
Sorry?
Are we still Are we talking to the void, or are we still on?
Yeah, yes, we are.
Good.
Yep, yeah.
Good deal. Just wanted to check, just to make sure.
Yep. So I think what we should plan to do over the week is see if Andy would want to come and...
I will. I am
join.
going to message him.
Yeah.
I'm going to go home and sleep.
Yeah.
But I'll message him after I wake up and take his temperature. It might take a day or so for him to get back to me, but I'll see
Sure.
if he wants to talk about
Second, if we can actually raise enough funds online, then we should try to revive the old PC. I think that's
Yep.
something that a lot of people have been asking for as well.
it. Yep. I would not, again, no promises. No promises. But it does exist. And we won't know what's on it until we crack it open. I mean, I'll be fair enough about it. It could be nothing. It could be something. I don't know. And that's about as honest as I can be about it because we were so thorough.
Right. Okay, cool. Let's discuss it after the
Yeah,
streaming
sure.
and we'll figure out how to go about it.
Sure.
Okay, guys, thank you so much. It's been a pretty long night out here and pretty significant day for me personally for stories. Extremely thankful for Bryce coming and doing this. I really don't know how this happened. Why stories? Honestly, I just like to believe it's serendipity.
Because
right?
it was supposed to. That's
yeah,
why it happened.
Yeah, I mean, there's absolutely no other, logical reason for this to happen the way it did. Of course, there's a lot of backstory that I have with crypto, Satoshi, etc. So if you really connect all the dots, it's just like absolute serendipity for this to happen. Thank you so much for the folks in the community for really looking forward to this and really pushing us to do this. Of course, as a founder, it's my first, I've been associated with a lot of crypto projects in the past, but as a founder, it's probably my first big launch. And it really helped for you folks to come out and just tell us that, if all of you all are excited and really looking forward to doing this. And thank you so much for being with us through the night.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you
so much,
Bryce.
man. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
This has been fun. And
Yeah.
it's going to be fun. There's a lot more to come.
Like Bryce said, this is just the beginning. There is just so much more to the story and to the IP development that's happening as we speak. We are also going to release a lot of token utilities in terms of more quantifiable buybacks, etc. How we'll go about doing all this stuff.
And I'm sure as time goes on, folks are going to have ideas and suggestions, like even the PC thing.
Yep.
We'll figure it out. Well, we've got the basics there, and that's what matters. And we'll iterate as we go. And I've launched a bunch of coins, more than I would care to admit to, frankly. And a lot of it, you just work it out based on what people want to see and what they want to happen. And join a community. It's linked in my profile. If you're watching this, you know what my profile is because we tweeted it from there. So, join the community. And if I'm not afraid of talking about this. I'm not afraid of people digging into my life. And I mean, look, if you go on Reddit and search my name, you will find people who have literally gone into like my arrest records and shit. And there's actually some, okay, so here's a funny story. So in 2017, I launched an exchange. I was starting to launch an exchange called Alt Market, which failed. But part of that was a Form D filing for the SEC. And in a Form D filing, you have to hire a lawyer who will do an independent background check on you, and then they have to file whether or not you're a criminal or you qualify. And then the SEC will verify the things that the lawyer tells them. So we used Mark Lopresti, Esquire. Mark, haven't talked to you in a while, man, but good looking out. He's a great guy. Awesome dude. He shows up on CNBC every now and then. A lot of fun to hang out with. And he's like kind of in the network. Friend of a friend. So he did us a solid. And one of the things they found was in a Reddit thread, somebody had posted an arrest record that I had from like 2000 or something, right? It was a picture that showed up on arrest.org. But his researchers, who actually went into the counties where I lived, could not find any record of this arrest. So he's like, what happened? and I had to sign a court notarized affidavit attesting to the fact that I don't know what happened to that record, and that it should not have disappeared, and it did exist, and I had nothing to do with it. But it was in Boone County, Kentucky, which is still good old boy country. And I'll tell the story like this is exactly the truth. I got arrested. I got custody of my daughter before I got married because my daughter was from my previous relationship, and I got custody. But for some reason, a judge thought that I should be paying child support for a child for which I had custody, and she issued a warrant for my arrest. So the sheriff showed up one day and arrested me. Well, I went, and this was like after I'd already gotten married again. Like this is years after. Like it might have even been like 2003 or so. And the judge that I had to appear for, that like I spent the night in jail, and the judge I had to appear in front of the next day was the judge who officiated my wedding.
Ooh.
And he's like a friend of my mom. And he's like, "What are you doing here? What is this?" And I'm like, I don't know. And he how judges do, he went through the document. He's like, "I'll take care of this. Dismissed. You're free to go." And, okay, fine. And I never thought about it again until 14, 15 years later when I had to file for the SEC, and even the record of my arrest was expunged. Oh. So, there is no record of this anywhere. And it was just good old boy Kentucky being good old boy Kentucky. And it was really funny because the crypto community found it. But by the time the lawyers got to it, it was gone. So somehow, and there's even a mugshot where I'm smiling, like I've got this smirk on my face. It's a ridiculous mugshot. But it goes to I tell that story as to the level of depth that people have dug into my background for years and years and years. I'm not afraid of anything I've ever done. I'm not afraid of anything anybody will find. Somebody has probably already found it and posted a thread about what a dickhead or an asshole or scumbag I am. So it's fine. Do as much digging as you like. In fact, I'll help you if I can, like the story I just told, which is why that record doesn't exist. So, it is what it is. Cool. Please participate.
Yep. So you're going to hear more from us. I think over the next 2 days there'll be a slew of updates from us. And yep, keep commenting, keep posting, keep liking. Do read Bryce's story though. Phenomenal, riveting, unfucking believable.
And there's more of the details in there that we haven't discussed.
A lot more.
Which I think would be which I think folks would really like to see. So.
Yeah, so if you're one of those rabbit hole kind of folks, which I think most degens are. By the way, sorry.
There was one thing that you wanted to talk about that we didn't. We didn't really touch on it though. And you said rabbit hole, and that's what triggered it. I'm a Freemason.
Yeah.
Yeah, 32nd degree Freemason. I was a Master Mason, Santa Barbara Lodge, number 192. And I was raised in, I got my third degree in 2009, February of 2009. So it was right after everything launched and stuff. And that actually played into the recovery of my daughter, which is what brought it up.
Right.
So it actually was a part of the story. So if you're a fan of conspiracy theories, Satoshi is a Freemason.
Yeah. You heard it first on StoriesDotFun.
That's right.
Cool, guys. So, let's connect tomorrow once again.
Yep.
And, this is obviously the first of many times you're going to hear from Bryce, of course.
And I started the community on X, but I want folks to use, I'm just going to moderate, crap posts and spam. This community is for you guys to, work it out. Help yourself accept it and help others accept the truth. That's it.
Awesome. I just joined the community. I just saw it though.
Good. You are welcome. Anybody's welcome.
Okay, guys. Cool. Nice connecting, and talk to you soon.
Thank you very much. Stay in touch.